And moving on to the top focus story on World Report now, Israel's opposition leader Yair Lapid has called on President Isaac Herzog not to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu unless he admits to guilt, expresses remorse and retires from politics, as it would harm the rule of law and allow the premier to evade responsibility for his alleged actions. Lapid's statement came shortly after Netanyahu asked the country's president for a pardon in his years-long corruption trial, arguing that criminal proceedings were hindering his ability to govern and a pardon would be good for Israel. Let's listen in to what the Israeli opposition leader had to say.
לנשיא הרצוג, אתה לא יכול לתת לו חנינה בלי הודעה באשמה, הבעת חרטה ופרישה מיידית.
Senior members of ruling coalition praised Netanyahu's decision to seek a formal pardon, and Defense Minister Israel Katz has called on President Isaac Herzog to accede to Netanyahu's request for a pardon, arguing that such a move would bring an end to the severe division that splits the nation. Meanwhile, President Herzog's office announced earlier that the request had been received, releasing the letter from the lawyers and adding that the request would be processed according to standard practice. Keith Vaz, who is the former British minister, now joins us live from London. Thank you, Mr. Vaz, for joining us once again on NewsX World. How are you viewing the sudden change in stance that Netanyahu is making in his corruption trial? Is it keeping the next year elections in mind?
Good afternoon, Kriti from London. The fact is, this is an extraordinary request from a sitting Prime Minister to a President, asking for there to be a pardon, because these particular proceedings have been going on for years and years. So it's difficult to know why now. Why is it being requested now? What President Herzog has to do is consider this very carefully. And it is right to say that if Israel is a country that believes in the rule of law, and it's a democracy, you have to allow the judicial process to be separate from government. Otherwise, there's no point in having an independent judiciary. So these are very serious and difficult issues for him to try and resolve. The complication, of course, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has not been convicted of anything. These are ongoing proceedings. There is no conviction. So what are you pardoned for? I can quite understand in America what happens is that you are convicted and then the president pardons you. So it's on the record.
Right.
But now he's actually not been convicted. He's an innocent man. Despite the fact that you've got all these proceedings going on, he's not been convicted of anything.
Right.
These are allegations, these are proceedings, these are investigations, but he's not been convicted. So what do you pardon? It's far better to write, I think, to the prosecution service and ask them to stop the proceedings until he ceases to be prime minister. For example, this is what happens in America. You can't do anything to deal with the American system until after it's over. In America, you write to the Attorney General and say to the American Attorney General, can you stop the proceedings because you're doing the prosecution? So this is extraordinary, bringing politics in this way into the judicial system. Does it mean every single person convicted or going through the process of every single crime can use this same defense? I can quite understand why the Prime Minister is doing this. He must be very busy in preparing his defense. But at the end of the day, you need to understand there is a far better value, and that is the rule of law. And that is presumably what President Herzog will consider.
Would you accede that this request for pardon is also an admission of guilt?
No, I wouldn't. I think that you can't possibly, if you accept that the principle of no one is found guilty until they've gone through due process, merely asking for it is not an admission of guilt, in my view. It is something for the courts to decide on. I mean, at the end of the day, of course, Donald Trump is the most powerful man in the world, can always pardon Netanyahu, even though he has no power to do so, because he's already, in a sense, pardoned him. He's received him in the White House. He knows that he's subject to an ICJ arrest warrant, but he has completely ignored that. So from that point of view, anyone can pardon him. But what really matters is whether the president of Israel is able to do so. And frankly, until this had happened, I didn't even know the president of Israel had the capacity to do this and pardon someone either in the middle of a trial or after conviction. In the UK, there is such a thing as a royal pardon, but this is usually for people who have been convicted of an offence years and years ago, and they are basically dead. And you go back and you say, let's posthumously pardon them. But I've not known of any case in terms of the British rule of law where this could happen. Very extraordinary.
What's a sense of what the president is going to do? There's also requests gone to him from Trump himself to pardon Netanyahu. What do you foresee?
Well, I don't think, look, in my heart, I don't think that Netanyahu would have written to the president unless he would know the outcome. There's the first rule of politics, and maybe in journalism as well, Pretty. I don't know whether you all are trained to do this in journalism. Don't ask a question unless you know what the answer is going to be. And therefore, from that point of view, he might already know what the answer is going to be. The fact that Donald Trump has asked for something does not mean the president of Israel should do anything, because, of course, he's above party politics. Why doesn't Netanyahu pardon himself? That's probably the best way to deal with it, because I don't know the system in Israel. I assume he appoints the Attorney General. I assume they have an independent prosecution system, and I assume that he appoints the person who does the prosecuting. So he can pardon himself. That would be much better for him than getting the president, who is above all party politics, to be involved in this matter. I think on either side, people are going to be pretty angry. But I think everyone who sits in the Knesset, who believes in the rule of law, should allow the due process to continue. Pardons should come at the end of the trial, not before the trial starts.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Vaz, for joining us and also for that lesson in journalism. And with that, we shift our focus now to news from Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainian military has